Hello,
Hi.
Cindy.
Hi,
Nice
good to
to see
see
you.
you.
You are the most requested guest on
Mm.
my interviews. Everyone's been asking for you. Yeah, I don't know. You probably don't watch this podcast, but
I
a
do.
few episodes back. All right, I mentioned somatic empathy as a concept, and I explained it very poorly. I'm sure. And I mentioned your name, saying that I'd actually learnt the term from a friend of mine, Cindy, and said obviously that you were doing a lot of work on it. And then, yes, didn't get around to talking to you for ages, but now seems like a great time because you just got your new book being
Yep.
released, which is called, oh, you've got it. Oh, hold it up.
Another Self. Well, that's probably going to come out back to front. Yeah, it's called Another
Yes.
Self, How Your Body Helps You Understand Others, which is, another way of saying somatic empathy. It's a book about somatic empathy. And it's because was in a previous life, I was a biologist, 40 years ago. So I've looked at it from that angle. Like what does modern biology have to say about this weird thing where we feel what other people feel? So, if I kind of I sort of need to distinguish what people normally think about empathy from somatic empathy, because it's a kind of specialist facet of empathy. Yeah. So if I'm sitting talking to you and you tell me that something terrible has happened, you've lost a really good friend, then I, being a normal person, would feel cognitive empathy. I would be able to work out that that would feel awful. Yeah. I would, by analogy, I would be able to say, oh, that would be terrible if I lost my dear friend. Yeah. So that's known as cognitive empathy. And that's what most people think of when they think about, how we understand each other on that kind of deep sympathetic level. But underneath that cognitive empathy, there's something going on, which is an embodied sharing of your condition. Yeah. So,
Yes.
and it's nothing to do with language. So if I came into the room, same person, same situation, and you didn't tell me that anything awful had happened, I'd still be able to feel it. And I might ask, is something wrong? Because I would start to feel the emotional alteration that had happened with you. And what's interesting is that scientists are just starting to get interested in this, in the nuances of what's going on, because there's an awful lot going on. And one of the reasons science hasn't looked at this before is because of complexity. And that's a kind of mathematical term. It doesn't just mean because it's difficult. It means because there are so many variables that it's quite hard to do experiments. And, so what's happening now is we've got science shifting from sort of reductionist science into holistic science. So they don't use the word holistic because it's been, ruined. So they've gone into systems science. So by looking at the human as a system interacting with another system, another human, they can work out the maths and the predictions of, how these two systems interact. And they don't interact like an apple bouncing into another apple, funnily enough. So it isn't the old physics stuff. It's really getting into some very interesting psychobiology. Yeah.
Sure. And reading your writing as well. I actually finished the book yesterday. Yeah, I finished the book yesterday. I enjoyed it very much.
You
And it
read
was
it?
great. Yeah, it was amazing. It reminded me very much of many of our conversations that we've had over the years, because maybe before I ask you some questions on it, I should just let people know who listen to this. I've known Cindy for a long time, almost 20 years or something now, I guess.
When you were 26.
Oh, 26. Oh, so 17 years or something like that. Yeah, a fair while. And we met on the Qigong course. And I remember meeting Cindy, and I remember thinking how polar opposite you were to me in so many ways, because I remember at that stage, I was a complete brick. Not only could I not feel, I was probably, if you had a spectrum of somatic empathy, I would be on the no somatic empathy, sort of sociopathic end of the scale. And it very much translated for me into the inability to feel anything around the concept of chi either. So I was just kind of going through the motions, but had no kind of feedback to the insides. And I remember meeting you, And actually, many of the other people, if you don't mind me saying, who had your level of what I would call sensitivity at the time, I found really woolly. But you had a groundedness in the way that you experience things, and also your view on life, that actually grabbed my attention. And it was kind of, I think, really sort of getting to know you that inspired me to actually go deeper into trying to actually feel for myself what was going on. So it was very important meeting you for me. So thank you for that. But it was interesting that right from the beginning you were talking about these concepts, and I think in the beginning, if I sort of let you explore this a bit, what fascinated me the most was early on, I think before you kind of came up with the concepts for this book or explored it, was very much it was your diagnostics in shiatsu, wasn't it? Is that fair to say that really you kind of explored it through?
Yeah, I did. Because you couldn't buy a book, you couldn't go on a course, and I couldn't ask anybody what was going on in it. But basically, when I started to train in body work, I immediately felt what they were feeling. And of course, you don't know at the time whether it's just your imagination, or you kind of just assume it must be your imagination. But I kept checking, and over 20 years of doing body work, I kept checking what I was feeling with the client and constantly getting confirmation. And again, that's not very scientific method. It's people often tell you what they want what they think you want to hear. But trial and error, just what used to be called experience.
Sure.
So you build an experiential database of trusting what you're feeling. Yeah. And it took a long time to trust what I was feeling. And again, it was really hard to find anything written down, and certainly in the scientific community that, it was way out there. But there's been some big changes lately in the approach, as I say, in the biological sciences, mainly, getting AI getting an ability to analyze masses of data so they can tackle complex systems, and how one brain couples with another brain. I mean, it never used to be possible. It was just out of our range of ability. And now neuroscientists can put sensors on one person's head and sensors on another person's head and correlate what's going on while they're interacting. And that's totally brand new. We used to just look at people in isolation in a laboratory and stick things in their brain and see what happens.
Which I think they should have done to you.
Slightly dismissive of the whole of neuroscience there, which
that's all right. No. And for those who maybe haven't seen this phenomena as well, or that's not true. I expect everybody's experienced it in life to varying degrees, haven't they? But to see somebody kind of viscerally go through that process, I remember seeing you do several shiatsu treatments and working with people. And what you're talking about is not just even necessarily just a feeling, is it? Because I watched it kind of map onto your body, and I've seen you go through sort of like gasp and stretch and have a kind of whole load of experiences, the same as your patient, is it fair to say, has stored in their body rather than at that very moment?
Yeah, so this brings us down to what's actually going on. And, the first question that people want to know is, is it me or is it them? Which is a long answer, which I will get to. But the other question is, are you actually catching something from this person? Is there a transfer of something? Because people do often say, oh, I got very bad energy. I caught bad energy from that person. And it's like, so I need to dismiss all that, because that's not necessary. You don't have to have that concept, because there are other explanations. So so what is going on if you're working on someone, or even you just walk into a room and you feel bad intentions from someone? It's quite easy to pick up malintent for all sorts of reasons. Going back through evolutionary past, we're very good at picking up malintent. And the thing is that our body our minded body has evolved to assess people incredibly quickly. So there's this thing called subliminal perception, where you can perceive what's going on around you without any awareness at all. And this is one of the ways we're getting into somatic empathy, is that your system is looking for potential danger or potential opportunities. Biology is all about death and sex. So it's like scanning, your unconscious is scanning for opportunities or dangers. And the speed of reaction in your body is so fast, it could be 1/4000th of a second. And scientists know this because they flash pictures, flash images at people, anything under 1/10 of a second, and you can't see it.
Anything? Oh, right. Okay. Yep. Sure.
So if and knowing that people are innately scared of spiders, they flash images of spiders very fast. The person can't see them, but their brain fires in the fear center.
Right.
And
Okay.
the fear center kicks off really, really quickly, almost to the point of immediacy.
Sure.
And the person has no idea that they've seen anything scary, but their brain has activated the fear centers. Now, that system is scanning your clients, it's scanning the whole room all the time. So even before you've kind of said, hello, how are you? Your body has taken on a sophisticated assessment of the potential threat, potential opportunity that is in your visual field. But it also happens through your ears, so you can flash a sound at someone too quickly that they can't hear it, but their brain will respond.
And that speed, rather than whatever the word is, like within the auditory spectrum, or
just the speed.
Right. Okay.
So literally just flashing a sound or a sight so quickly that your sensory system can't do it. I mean, as humans, we're really limited to this sensory, box.
Sure.
If things happen too quickly, we don't notice them. If they happen too slowly, we don't notice them. And that's nothing to do with
sure. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, where was I going with this? So even words, you can flash words at people really quickly, or you can speak words to people really quickly and they won't notice them, but the brain has registered the meaning of the word. So this was discovered in the 60s and was called subliminal perception. And of course, advertisers got really excited. We can make people buy our product and they won't know that they're, and so it was banned in the UK. I looked up yesterday on Google, and apparently it's not banned in the US. So
still not banned.
No,
that doesn't surprise me.
They're supposed to voluntarily disclose whether they're subliminally advertising to you. Anyway.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
So that system is already responding, and it isn't just in your brain. So if you wire up people's skin, they'll be getting a flash of electrical conductance through the skin. Pupil size will be changing, blood flow will be changing to the face. So you're getting these instant reactions. So what seems to happen after that initial assessment is, and that's completely unconscious, is that gets filtered to whether this person is of interest to you or not.
According to sex or death.
Basically, yeah,
Right. Okay. Yep. Primal stuff.
That's what it evolved for, but actually we can use it for anything. So, and the people who study unconscious behavior are saying that we use it for anything. So you can use it for like spotting how many red cars there are, and it will alert you to how many red cars are going past. So we adapted this system that evolved for sex and death to anything. So once this part of your unconscious decides, this person is of interest for any reason, and in a therapeutic situation, they're of interest because you're the therapist. Yeah,
you would hope so.
So you're interested in them.
Yes.
What happens when the interest is fired up is your attention shifts So all I've talked about before happens without your conscious attention, and now your conscious attention comes in, and then some magic happens, as in when your attention is there, you embody what you perceive about that person. It, strangely enough, called
Right. Okay. Yeah.
perception.
Okay. So
And
is oh sorry, no, go
that's
ahead.
right.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I was curious. So the attention gets involved. It kind of so is it safe to say that as well as embodying it to a certain degree, it also translates it for you to understand?
That's exactly why you embody it. Before
Right.
language,
Yeah.
because we share this somatic empathy with mammals and birds.
Hmm.
Um, all the ones that have been tested anyway have shown it. So the only way you can truly understand another individual without language is to feel how they feel,
Hmm.
is to take on their condition, to get under their skin and feel what it's like to be them, and then come out again.
Okay.
And this is a really quick and really efficient way to assess other individuals pre-language, pre-verbal. So I don't need to know that, you don't need to tell me if you're anxious,
Hmm.
because I will feel anxious myself as we're talking to each other. Um, your dog doesn't need to understand that you're sad. It will feel the physiological changes of your
Sure. Yes.
sadness. Yeah. And will know that something's wrong. Um, so they, so it takes away this need for any kind of clever intellect or any kind of theory of mind. It's very, very primitive, very, very basic. But even though it's basic and primitive and ancient and da 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 da, it's the foundation of all the rest of empathy. So
Sure. Yeah.
when scientists test boys with psychopathic traits,
Sure.
they find that these boys are perfectly capable of cognitively working out that someone is feeling sad because their best friends died, but they don't feel it.
Right.
And because they don't feel it, the quality of their cognitive empathy is different. And we often interpret it as false. They say, "Oh dear, how sad! That must be terrible." But they're not feeling it. And we do kind of expect people to share the pain in themselves. Otherwise, it's like, those are just words.
Right. Okay. So yeah, that all makes sense, and it's so I guess one of the questions I'd have straight away is how much do you think that when the obviously pure attention is quite difficult. It's
Yeah,
a skill, right? Or it's a quality that must be developed. So a lot of intention is kind of carried along with attention. They're kind of
yeah,
accidentally intertwined, aren't they?
yeah.
So I wonder how much, or what do you have any comments really on how much people can distort that message according to their own projections or something like this?
Wow. I mean, yeah, it's when we get to the question of, well, is it me or is it them? My
Yeah,
answer is it's all you. Everything that's happening to you is all yours.
sure.
um, and the reason the book is called Another Self is because the latest understanding of all this stuff is that we simulate another self in order to understand. So we make the other self in ourselves to feel
Okay.
it, and therefore get that deep understanding, that pre-verbal understanding. So I've generated it. It's mine.
Sure.
And what I can generate, what simulations I can generate about other people depends on my life experience
Hmm.
and my subjective interpretation. And interpretation is a really sticky area. I often find, especially with animal communicators for some reason, is that there's an over interpretation. So,
Yes. That's even safe to say from pet owners. I sometimes think the amount they project onto their pet, little Timmy the dog would like tea at 2 p.m. or something, and
yeah,
I often think there's a projection there.
yeah. So you can, it's really easy to share cross species. Emotional contagion is really strong between species for all sorts of very good evolutionary reasons. If there's a danger, in the jungle and one animal has spotted it and none of the others have. You need that emotional contagion of fear and get away to spread really quickly.
Sure.
They haven't got time to go around saying, oh, wait, there's something going on down there. So they have to, it has to be contagious and it has to be rapid. And different species have to be able to feel. I mean, a predator has to be able to feel the weakest member of the pack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very specific. Yeah. So is that predator then feeling? It's funny. So I guess there's some somatic empathizing for the biggest amount of fear amongst all of the animals. Which one is the weakest?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think that would be really complex research project.
Right. Okay.
How do you ask? So, Tiger, how do you feel about this?
Sure.
But what we can know is that they produce embodied simulations of others. They produce embodied simulations between species, and so it's another added method that predator and prey can use to assess safety or weakness. And we're doing that all the time still, but we've got our intellect yakking away over the top.
And you see it within almost any social group setting to a certain degree, don't you? When a bunch of people, I always think when a bunch of people come together who don't know each other, maybe a friend's dinner party or something, that you almost have that kind of predator and prey dynamic going on there, where people figuring out who's a threat, who's higher on the pecking order or whatever, and same kind of thing, right?
Who's fit? Yeah.
Yeah, well, the sex and death comes into it as always. When you're talking about this as well, it reminds me of maybe I'm wrong in this, but it reminds me of, like, if say you're very, very upset and something very bad has happened, and then I've got a friend of a similar age or whatever who's around me, they can often, I guess subconsciously or through this method, empathize quite exact details on what's going on because of their life experience, I guess, and they have a bigger data bank to draw from, right? Kind of memories. But if you have around a child, like a kid I always think picks up in a smaller spectrum. So it knows sad, it knows happy, it knows danger, but the child doesn't have the experience that it can't draw upon such a big database. Is that fair to say?
That's right. I mean, the embodied perception is really fascinating. It's because there's this difference between sensing something, like a machine, so just detecting light, and actually perceiving. And perceiving has we need meaning, don't we? So there's no use me just perceiving light. I have to interpret the meaning of that light into trees and sky and floor and houses. Yeah. Otherwise, I'll just fall over. So I have to. Perception has this massive embedded meaning, and the reason that we embody while we perceive is so that we can extract meaning. So if I'm talking to you and you get angry, my simulation of your anger won't be interpreted as anger unless I have experienced anger myself, in which case when I experience the changes, I'll go, oh, he's feeling angry, because I'm quite familiar with anger. But when I experience somatic empathy with things that I have no experience of, it just feels weird.
Okay,
and I just don't know what it is.
I remember you palpating me once and saying it felt like alien gibberish coming out of my brain. So that's not a good sign. That was your direct words.
Was it?
Yes. Yeah.
That doesn't sound like me. I'm much more polite than that.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, you know me well enough. So you know that obviously I'm going to throw a spanner in the works here, or definitely not, because I know you have a view on this, but it's not something that you mentioned in the book, because the book, I think it's fair to say, was written not from a scientific perspective. It makes it sound cold. It wasn't that. It was very personal as well, and I could see you in it. The way you were talking about not just your previous cases, you gave some examples in there, but also I could see your previous kind of not zoology background, animal research, whatever it was you were doing, whatever the word is.
There's lots of animals.
Like the dog copying the limp of the owner, which I've seen actually. I've seen that very exact example. I always find that very cute. But you kind of, it was very warm, but it was also quite Western
Yes.
in its
Yes.
viewpoint, I guess, for the readership, right?
So
Who you're speaking.
Yeah. So doing my research on what books are available, there are lots of books about empathy which are not scientific, and they're all experiential and subjective. And and there are quite a few academic books that are really heavy and undigestible about empathy at that end. And I want, as I did with my last book, Wild Health, I want to close this bridge and keep, bring both sides together, really. Is that, neither of you are wrong, but you're not talking to each other.
Sure, I get it.
As someone said to me yesterday, so you're going to cut a path cleanly between both audiences.
Cleanly. Well, that's pretty much going back to what I was saying about what I thought when I met you, that again, you were talking about same kind of things that I'd met people speak about before, but they were a bit too woolly for me, because I'd come from a martial arts background into the Qigong world, and you were speaking about it in a more grounded way. So I found that appealing. So it makes sense to me that you presented that way, for sure.
So so there's it's not about the book is not about the sort of stuff that you do, Damo. It's not about
nonsense. Yes,
but I do think it's relevant because it just bridges this massive divide between the rational analytical and the intuitive experiential, and they are two completely different ways of thinking. And the other week you did a podcast where you were talking about left and right brain with Lawrence, what do you call him?
Lawrence Blair. Yeah.
And I mean, lots of people use this left brain, right brain stuff, but I don't like it because it's very brain centric. Sure. And the thing about, I prefer to divide, because there are these two distinct neurological systems that we use for understanding something.
Okay.
And the rational analytical relies on the cerebral cortex, the really clever part of being human. But humans aren't the only ones that have cerebral cortex, but anyway. And the other lot, the intuitive experiential, is this really ancient intelligence that's so poorly understood. And that's where somatic empathy is taking place. And but I didn't want to only talk to people who are already intuitive experiential. I wanted to bring some rational analytical folk along and say, come on, it's not nonsense. This stuff is the foundation of your rational analytical thought processes.
Yes. Well, but also this is where I think this comes in as well from another direction, that is obviously the field, well, you're in as well. You're also a Qigong teacher and practitioner of a long time, but very much the process of teaching Qigong, I believe, uses not just somatic empathy, but the other thing you mentioned briefly in the book at the beginning, which I'm going to pronounce wrong, kinesthetic empathy. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Kinesthetic, which is something that I think kinesthetic empathy, which, or maybe you could describe it, the difference between the two, if there is one.
Well, I'm not, the first chapter of the book is really just showing all the different terms that people use and they're overlapping. But to try and pull them apart, I think, would be really difficult. Okay. I think kinesthetic empathy is a component of somatic empathy. I think you need to feel how the other is feeling in order to sense the proprioceptive changes that are going on in the body. But and you're either good at that or you're not. It's quite an interesting little limited
limited
skill.
I know what you mean. So do you not think something like that can be trained? Do you think it's inherent in someone?
Yes, I mean, I've noticed that over 20 odd years of trying to of applying somatic empathy, that it's got stronger and stronger to the point where I now find it uncomfortable to watch a film in case there's some violence, because it will hurt me.
Sure. You have to watch from behind the couch.
That never used to happen. So I think it's that's getting worse. That kind of
physical pain, not emotional pain, physical pain, like actual.
Oh yeah, no, I mean,
right.
You know how you might get a tingle in your foot if you watch someone's toe being stumped.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
You
Yeah, I don't like
share that sort of tingle.
that.
Well, mine can be really strong, and it's not, it's unpleasant. So
Sure. It's
there
funny
are
when I
some
was reading.
there's
Oh,
some
sorry,
really
go on.
extreme people who've got pain contagions so strongly that their life is very difficult. And I
Hmm.
mention them a little bit in the
Hmm.
book, in that they're usually called mirror touch synesthetes, but if they see someone being touched, they feel the touch on their own skin. So if they see someone being hurt, they feel the pain as if they've been hurt themselves. And
Oh,
that was one of the ways that scientists got interested in somatic empathy. It was like,
right, okay.
what's going on with these guys?
Can it leave marks? Could create the body?
Does it? No,
I
because
worried about some like stigmata or something. Jump into an extreme example or something like
well,
this.
I don't know how far this process can go, but we are imagining, simulating what is
Hmm.
going on for others all the time. And for some people, that's really, really uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
so, this is why I mention all the mental health applications. If you start to look at some of the mental health problems from the perspective of a somatic empathy problem, if you
Sure.
go into a room and you can feel what everyone is feeling, it's chaos.
Yeah, I don't think I'd like that.
No. And
No.
so,
Okay.
this ability to be able to separate self from other is
Hmm.
a really important component in managing mental health. And there's a lot of interest now in looking at, I don't know if you know the new buzzword interoception, but it's basically how you feel inside. And academic papers on interoception have gone through the roof. So they've just realized that, it's not so much a mental problem in a lot of the mental health problems, but it's an interoception problem. Yeah. So they're feeling way too much
Hmm.
about what
Okay.
everyone else around them is feeling, and consequently appear completely dysregulated.
Yeah, I can equate with that. Working in when I worked in mental health, um, only as a social worker rather than a therapist. So I was normally going in for a very practical role. I wasn't really getting involved on too deep a level on that level. But I definitely learned very quickly that the best thing I could do was center and calm myself and not go into that space if I had any stress or anything like this. So I'd have to walk around the car park outside the psychiatric unit for a few times, chill out, and then go in. And then people would be a lot better with me, and it would be calm, and it would be fine, and it'd be okay. But if I went even slightly stressed,
Yeah.
I couldn't hide it from anybody at all.
Yeah.
Like they could pick it up so quick, and the same kind of stress I could hide from most people for sure.
Yeah, and it does give us a bit of responsibility, because
Mm.
especially if you're a teacher and everyone's attention is on you, you do have a responsibility um, to model what is appropriate for the situation. So yeah, you don't want to be coming in and modeling any kind of stress if you're trying to relax people.
No, totally. And
How?
this brings me back to where I was saying I want to throw a spanner into the works a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll disagree with this, so I'm curious to get your take on it. But I think that I feel that as a teacher, when you're talking about something like, say, transmission or chi emission or something, that you're kind of, I think one aspect of it is that you're tapping into this somatic or kinesthetic empathy, but you're kind of reverse engineering it, and then you are projecting it out into the people that you teach in a way, so that the stronger you build that field, that you can make subtler and subtler changes within yourself, and then the degree of chi that you put out can almost draw people into somatically empathizing with you, if you get what I
Mm.
mean. Does that make sense?
I do, and it's not in a book because there's no research on that reciprocity.
Right. Okay.
It's known that there is a reciprocity. Good word, isn't it?
It is. I'm not
When
going to repeat it. Get it wrong.
it's easy for you to say, but it's not this sort of one-way clunky system of I look
Hmm.
at you and I simulate what's going on for you, end of story. There's a
Yes.
there's a conversation, and that conversation, the direction and what's going on in that conversation depends on the people involved. So you have you as the teacher in that situation, you can't possibly have your attention on every single individual, but they have their attention on you.
Yes.
So there's a direction there, as in they are simulating what's going on for you rather than the other way around. But there's the intention bit, and there's also past connection. So, not much research been done on this, but I suspect the brain coupling that happens, we haven't talked about brain coupling.
Okay, go on then. Go ahead.
But yeah, so Professor Hassan, who has written most of the papers about brain coupling between human beings, says that, and he's probably said this just to be quite controversial, but he seems to believe it's true, is that the way your brain works depends on who you are hanging out with, who you are focusing on, who you're connected to. Your brain physiology changes to adapt to the one you're trying to understand. So so the students' brains are going to be struggling to change the way they work to understand what's going on with you.
Okay. Yeah.
And that can affect the whole system.
Sure. Okay. Yes.
From a sort of biological point of view.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But then it becomes like a relationship, so that can continue when you're not around. So.
Okay, explain that. Maybe explore that a bit. That's very interesting. You can't just hint at something like that, Cindy. Spell it out for us.
Spell it out for us. So we'll have to go back to some animal studies to get to the simple bits. But firstly, when they started looking at, it's called hyperscanning, when you look at more than one brain at the same time and you correlate what's going on between them. And when they first started doing this, they found that brains came into coordination with each other and they started to work together. But then they found that in societies, animal societies, where you had a dominant animal and subordinate animal, the dominant animal's brain didn't change at all. It was really sort of stubbornly unchanged, and all the subordinates kind of tried to get a brain like his.
Right. Okay. There's something kind of ugly about that, I think. But
yeah, but from a sort of biological perspective, you haven't got time to work out every problem yourself. And if you've got a leader that knows more stuff, is wiser, or can think better, you just fall into line. It's much easier. Just fall into line. And human brains are incredibly prone to falling into line, because that's how we've survived. We've followed the most intelligent, wise leader. Just like we do.
Yeah, yes. I was going to say, there's a political example there, or not. We'll see. Yeah.
No, but your leader had to be the best when it was a matter of survival.
Sure.
You couldn't follow an idiot if you were living in a cave with saber-toothed tigers hanging about, could you?
So that projection. Or the reshaping of everything as well. Obviously, that translates into the body. That's the kind of visceral embodiment of what you're experiencing.
Only measuring the brain, so that's what's it's so limited, because they're only interested in the brain there. Whereas if if you could measure the whole thing, which you can't because of the complexity, then you'd see the whole system is adjusting and trying to adjust.
You can't measure. Excuse my ignorance on science. You can't measure changes in the nervous system or kind of plasticity in the tissues or anything like this as it changes according to.
I mean, you can measure all of these things individually, but what I'm saying is that if you've got a hyperscanning situation set up with the skull cap and all the hundreds of little electrodes, and another skull cap and hundreds of little electrodes, and all the computing technology, that is more than enough for them to deal with. So add in, skin changes, blood changes, heart rate changes.
Okay.
But the complexity is overwhelming. But they will get there.
Once we got Neuralink, maybe we'll be able to think fast enough to do it.
Just download the information,
Okay. Oh,
So I don't
because
know if I've answered your question. Oh yeah, intention and
mhm.
projection. Yeah, so no research at all on that.
Okay, but you have experienced this yourself, and I've seen you use it in a class.
Yeah,
So you're aware of it, I'm sure, as a process.
I I think it's part of the reciprocal relationship that happens when someone's trying to understand you and you're trying to inform them. This information exchange, when it becomes conscious and the intention is to exchange information, I think there is that flow in both directions.
And
Well, that's what it feels like to me anyway.
what I'm interested in as well is the, amongst other things, is the sheer volume of chi that you build, the sheer volume of that kind of magnetic energy that you build around your body. The stronger that projection seems to be, it's like when people are within that field, their kinesthetic or um, uh, their somatic empathy increases, and it seems to me that it can almost overpower somebody that's quite switched off from somatic empathy in a way. It's like they become engulfed in it. And the funny thing is I see the people, I guess like myself when I was younger, who are very removed from that kind of experience, that visceral experience, are the ones that become the sort of most emotionally overwhelmed by that process because they're kind of dragged into it. And I still never come to terms with the kind of ethics of that. You know what I mean? Like, should you project and drag someone into a process that their body or their mind is not used to doing, or should you not?
I guess if they, there's that contract that they've paid to come and be trained by you,
Sure.
and yeah, and you are helping a shift, presumably, in that it's a new experience. Um, but no, I try to explain in the book that biology really isn't tackling chi fields at all. It's just way behind. Um,
But you mentioned sorry,
bioelect.
electromagnetic, yeah, biomagnetic fields
Yeah,
from the heart was mentioned in there, and from the body.
yeah. I mean, they're going to get there, but there's such a historical problem with issues of vitalism and so on.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, the bioelectricity is a really hot topic, and they'll kind of get there. But it fascinates me, the intention. I mean, one of the things I've always noticed about you is how strong that intention field is of yours.
I'm not subtle.
I remember, yeah, us training in a park in Cardiff, and yes, you were influencing my body from afar, which was really, yeah, strong.
Yeah.
But,
Sorry.
with the knowledge that I have now, or the different understanding, it's like, that's my interpretation of what was going on, and, my um I'm interpreting the information, and by information I mean all sorts of information on all levels. Yeah. So, and it would have been really unfamiliar information to me. I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, and I have the experience when I go to see teachers that are working at a much higher level than me, and then just sometimes my body can mirror or empathize or generate or viscerally create what's going on, and sometimes it's so alien to me,
Yeah.
it's so far beyond my experience that it just causes pain, like physical
Wow.
pain. And I'll go home and I'll sit there in the hotel room after the training or something, and I'm just uncomfortable all over my body. And I have to go through a process where I have to go see that person several times to go through it. And then eventually my body can translate what is trying to be taught. And then the pain goes away. And then there's some kind of shift, which is reading your writing actually kind of, in a way, opens a window and understanding that process for me a little bit.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Is that
Hmm.
I like the way you use that word, your body has to translate it, because I think that's what's happening. Um,
Sure.
is that your body is a 3D simulator, and we try out different three-dimensional sensations of how it is to be this other person. And sometimes we recognize it, or we only recognize parts, and sometimes we don't recognize it at all.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and I often get that with, I can have a client who's got great big cancerous tumours that I can see, and I don't feel anything at all about them, and presumably because I haven't had that in my experience.
Right. Okay. Yes. So you don't know the feeling. It's not in
I don't. I
your
can,
database.
I can feel thermal heat with my hands, but I can't. I don't feel anything interoceptively
Sure.
about that. Yeah, and therapists are often quite what's the word? Quite interested in the fact that they get clients that have similar experiences to their own, and I'm thinking, well, it's not a surprise, really, is it?
Sure. Yes. Okay. Yeah. 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 I can see that. And it's there's a there was just pulling some other bits out of your book. I don't want to jump around too much, but there was a few bits that I'm very fascinated by, and one of them was a very almost like a not a throwaway comment, but it was just something very small that you said in there. That you won't empathize with somebody you don't like was the implication from something that was written in there. If I
That was
misquote
a
you, then
research
please say
study of nurses.
yes.
You
Oh
know,
yes, yes.
wasn't my work at all. It was research study looking at empathy in nurses, and they found that completely unconsciously they empathized much more readily with beautiful people and polite people.
Yes. Well,
I don't think that's, shocking.
isn't that like in the news when an ugly kid goes missing? They never mention it, but if she's beautiful, then child goes missing or something like that because they know that people don't care if it's ugly,
I
right?
know, I know,
Yeah,
I
it's
know.
very basic as creatures.
The thing,
But
what did you
it,
think about the? You might not have noticed it because that was just a small paragraph as well. But the research showing that people who take painkillers can't feel somatic
yeah,
empathy.
yes, yeah. I
Amazing.
actually have that written down as something I wanted to speak to you about.
Yeah,
If you take painkillers, you can't somatic empathize, and I wondered
because it
how.
reduces your interoception, it reduces somatic sensations.
So I guess that would apply to other things like people who are regularly using drinking alcohol or any medications at all
Any
in theory, right?
numbing, yeah.
So that would explain why you have someone who drinks a lot or not even drinks a lot, drinks regularly. I've seen people that don't really get drunk, but they drink regularly, which to me numbs them, and you just watch all of their relationships break down
Yeah. Yeah, well,
in their life.
you can't feel how anyone else is feeling with it. I mean, it was specific to paracetamol, wasn't it? The study,
Yes, which
very
isn't even that
specific. And then
strong.
I just thought, well, hasn't America got a pain-killing epidemic?
Sure. Well, on top of that, then you took it the other way, and the Botox was very interesting as
Yeah,
well. A
yeah,
positive application of this. So if you,
yes.
so is did I understand? If you freeze, that's what Botox does, right? It kind of freezes the face or prevents you from creating a muscular shape of a particular emotion that prevents the feedback, so you no longer feel that feeling, right?
Yes. It reduces your reduces your emotionality because
Right. Okay.
you can't imitate people's facial expressions and therefore pick up all the emotions around you.
That would imply that the actual mechanism of your face changing actually is a trigger to change the way you feel, right?
It is totally. It's called
Rather
facial
than a
feedback.
byproduct.
It's called facial feedback, and it's really,
Okay.
really important because we tend to think that the brain tells the body what to do, and that's that. But actually, the muscle pattern in your face informs your brain of how you're feeling. If you think about it, your brain is locked in a dark box. It can't sense anything, and it
Right.
has no
Yes.
idea what's going on unless the body, as a 3D simulator, tells it what's going on with other people, how does this other person feel, what's going to happen next, what are they going to do, and so the body has to embody that and tell the brain. And the best way to tell the brain is by a body pattern, a simulation in the body.
Right. It would imply that a lot of it, random thoughts that jump into my head, is it would imply a lot of it might be to do with the face more than a lot of the rest of the body. Because if I think about, I worked in a hospital for a little while where people were paralyzed from the neck down, so they had no feeling whatsoever. But yet, still, when you talk to them, cognitively full emotional range and everything, but their faces weren't paralyzed at all. So it would
I
imply
mean,
that bit of you is important, or maybe your body just readjusts.
I think from what I could gather, it isn't just facial expressions,
Okay.
because bodily, what they call bodily expressions of emotion, have the same effect. So if I slump, I'll feel slightly less happy than if I'm stood up. You know, you're
Sure.
informing your brain, that the posture informs your brain of how you're feeling, as not just facial expressions. And of course, if you're imitating other people's gestures, which, you know, all the students are imitating your proprioception, your gesture, and so their emotional landscape will change with that. And that's strong stuff.
Like making the military stand upright and thrust their chest, which is a very angry posture, confrontational, really.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's the other thing that I thought was interesting. Now you're talking about what was the example you used? People watching, maybe they were watching sport or dance, and they were feeling the same twitches going in their muscles. Did you use dance or sport as an example? I apologize. They were watching it and they were feeling what the people on the TV were doing, feeling the dancers or feeling the sports.
Yeah, that was the dancers. That was a bit of research on. But they were dancers, like professional dancers, watching other dancers.
Yes.
So again, it's the somatosensory memory.
Right.
You see what I mean? It's in their database to recognize it and to feel it.
Well, that's what it made me think of, because I was thinking when I watch movies, they don't move me at all. Like it doesn't affect me. I don't feel anything. But if two characters start fighting on the screen, I don't know if I get emotionally involved, but muscles start twitching. I feel my bicep go and my tricep, they twitch as if I'm kicking or striking, but it's the only thing that ever does it. Nothing else.
That's, you know, and you're automatically understanding the fight in your body. I'm the same with show jumping. I used to do jumping on horses, and I can't watch show jumping because my body gets in too much of a state.
Sure. And show jump is not great for your spine, from what I've said either. All that land.
No. But I can watch other sports that I haven't ever played without getting involved. Very interesting. Yeah.
So as a therapist, it would imply that you want to be opening up your experiences to many, many things if you want to be as effective as you can, right?
Well,
or in some way. It doesn't mean you want to have every illness under the sun. But
I think what it means is that, it's like the old thing about, the wisdom thing is that you've got life experience and you can draw on that. It's not something you learn in a book, is it? It's quite the old stuff.
And it really, I find there might be another application for it, for people to kind of understand a little bit about where maybe their life path might be, which might be a little abstract. But if I can only use a personal example, but like looking at this, I can understand why if I'm in a clinic working as a body worker or needles, acupuncture or something like that, I feel nothing for the person that I'm working on. Like there's no feedback, nothing. And yet if you stand me in a class and I'm teaching Tai Chi or Qigong, I feel everything that's wrong with everybody in the class. But there's no difference between the two, that I just don't like being a therapist in that setting. It's not what I enjoy doing. So it feels like that part of my mechanism is switched off, really.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Like life path, it kind of, this is where I'm supposed to be and this is where I'm not supposed to be. Yeah,
there has been some research on how enjoyment kind of plays into somatic empathy. It's almost like the nurses only feeling empathy for people they like. There's a reward system. In our biological bodies, there's a reward system of feeling pleasure when we're doing something that's going to take us in the right direction.
And deviant. Yeah.
And I think that goes on at all levels. I'm very good at switching off that somatic empathy, because, and I think I learnt it naturally. I don't think I've only learnt it recently. I learnt it as a kid. You might call it dissociation, but I learnt, if I don't want to feel other people's traumatic arguments, I just disengage.
That's probably something that people might want to know, how you learnt that. Do you think there's any way, or is it something that's probably difficult to put into words?
It's a response to overwhelm. as a kid.
Okay.
Is just to, and what I learned was to not pay attention to the uncomfortable people. Yes, if you've got people around you with uncomfortable emotions, I just don't pay any attention to them.
Right, okay. I've actually seen you do that, and you do it very well, yeah.
I will just walk away.
It's admirable.
Mid-sentence.
I don't know if you want me to say, but I do remember the amount of courses that I was on you with, and you just had enough of someone stupid and walked away. I saw you do it, and I never disagreed with you actually at all. I thought you were well in your rights. Actually, there's a lot of crazy people on these courses.
Yeah. I don't need your mental health problems as well as my own. Thank you. I'm off. Yeah. How to deal with it? I think it is a matter of you do have to get some mindfulness skills. You do have to get to know where your attention is, what your intentions are, and that means going right back into what are your unconscious intentions. So when I'm working on a client, consciously, I like to not have a strict intention. I like to not have a plan of what I'm going to do, because I'm working intuitively, experientially, and so on. Sure. But obviously, there's an intention to help, and that intention is enough to trigger somatic empathy. But I don't sustain somatic empathy through the whole hour of treatment. That would be exhausting. I get enough to feel, oh yeah, that doesn't feel very nice, or yeah, that needs, a little bit of information, and then switch off, get on with doing something about what I've just sensed. I might switch it on again, and the way you switch it on and off is to engage with your own inquiry, your own inquisitiveness. Curiosity is a thing, it's a thing that changes your whole system. Sure. So if you're curious about something, not only are all your senses aimed at finding out the answer, but this massive unconscious mind gets into gear to help you solve your curiosity problem. And it's a massive, I was going to say it's a massive tool, but you know what I mean? It's a massive resource. Sure,
I get you. Yeah, and it that brings up that thing as well. It would make me think that a high degree of somatic empathy, because I'm sure everybody's on a scale somewhere, without any kind of cultivated mental governance, I don't want to say mental control, but you know what I mean, would be dangerous almost.
Yes.
Or could be detrimental to your own well-being if you were constantly living in that state.
Well, what I find is that people who don't know what's going on they don't know it's somatic empathy, and they're very sensitive, is that they do a lot of drugs to try and deaden it all.
Oh, all right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That the amount of highly, I guess they would term them, or I guess the unskilled way of saying it is highly emotional, tough guys, martial artists I know who numbed themselves with alcohol and drugs was very, very high. Or numbed themselves with changing into always feeling angry and confrontational, which became like a drug to replace what they were feeling. And when you scratch beneath the surface, there's a lot of pain there in them.
Yeah. I mean, there's a painkiller epidemic for a reason. It's because, there's a lot of stuff going on that we're not separated from. When I watch the television or hear the news, I'm embodying the trauma.
Sure.
And, this is 24/7 in the world. So it's no wonder, everyone wants to take whatever the latest painkiller is.
And what I've learned is if they just replace the painkillers with Botox, they'll be okay, right? That's the key.
That's the take-home point.
There's one thing I wanted you to speak about a little bit more, if that was okay, particularly was your example of Princess Diana. And I remember when that was in the book, right? And I remember when Princess Diana passed away, which was what year? 98, 97 or something
97,
like that?
I think.
Something. I was late teens anyway. And I think I was drunk the night before, and I was a hangover. I think I passed out on my parents' couch, and I remember my mum waking me up, waking up, and said, "Oh, Princess Diana died." And I remember thinking, "We have a Princess Diana?" I had no idea. Like I was so unattached. I didn't know anything about such things about the world. But I do remember that being really confused at how sad everybody was, and that's not to take away from the death of somebody. That's
those
very
were your
tragic.
psychopath days, were they?
just yes, I guess so. But it was amazed at the sheer illogical amount of emotional outpouring I saw for a person who may have been wonderful, but
it was massive.
My neighbor was wonderful, and she died the year before, and the whole country didn't cry for her. So I was confused by it. So seeing you link that to somatic empathy was very interesting.
Well, it's a modern example of what used to be called mass hysteria.
Sure.
And,
yeah.
Now they would call it, emotional contagion. Because what we were getting were newspapers, magazines with people crying all over the telly. We even had, journalists on BBC who couldn't talk because they were so joked up. And it's like, what?
Yeah. It wasn't that different when the Queen died, and as a non-royalist, I was quite confused about that too. But it was a very similar situation, wasn't it?
It was nothing near as big as Princess Diana. I mean, the thing about Princess Diana mass hysteria was that it went on for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Even a month later, people were choking up about it, and I caught it, and I'm like you, I'm neither here nor there about them, but I could feel the sadness.
So is that do you think that was partially mirroring an individual, or sorry, mirroring's the wrong, well, it's not mirror neurons you're talking about. Is it mirroring somebody individually that you're seeing on the news like that, or is it more a collective?
The imagery,
kind of
you're constantly surrounded by those facial expressions of sadness, the sound, the voices of sadness, constantly. The emotional contagion is really strong in our species, and what worries me at the moment is this mass fear that everyone is embedded in,
okay, yes,
and how to distance our attention from that.
Yeah, and then the opposite, you get the other end of the scale, where if you watch people who watch a lot of going back to movies, a lot of people getting machine gunned down on mass action films or video games, where the computer game characters don't, obviously because they're computer graphical characters, they don't have a full spread of real emotions. So people are, or actors, like Rambo's going to look like I'm really old, but you know what I mean? Actually, I think he still makes films, but like those kind of characters emotionlessly killing people.
I know.
I guess that must be kind of empathized or mirrored to some extent in people as well, right?
I think it's a real danger, and I found a study of children doing gaming where, I mean, obviously a gamer is somatically empathizing in order to understand the game. In order to win the game, you've got to predict what the characters are going to do next. And so you really have to get, your 3D simulator gets fully into how they're going to move next, what they're going to do next. So that is full on somatic empathy with the character, who is fictional and can often perform, actions that humans can't perform. And it's all run by AI. So your brain is trying to couple with artificial intelligence the whole time. And we don't know what's going to happen as the brain struggles to couple with artificial intelligence.
Sure.
Where was I going with that?
I was just asking. I was asking about like seeing, I guess, an act like killing that should be connected to an emotional response that is then disconnected by somebody doing it unemotionally. If you get what I mean.
Well, the worst thing is these poor drone soldiers. The soldiers that operate drones from a distance, and so they are involved in killing people thousands of miles away and from their own home, and then they'll go back down and have dinner with their kids and whatever. And there's huge problems with PTSD with these guys who are killing without emotion, and there is a natural emotion. They are embodying the emotion, and it's not being processed or dealt with. And what's awful is at the moment they're classified as office workers, and so they're not given any psychological help or mental health support. I know, because they're not.
You can't call a drone bomber an office worker.
They're not in the field, are they? So
right. Okay. Yeah, I'm not a fan of all this kind of movement towards that direction. No, I mean, I don't know much about drone bombers, obviously, but having watched my brother and other people get lost in video games, and seeing and students as well, young male students who have been usually male, who've been very involved in these kind of games. And there is a like a little sort of zombified quality to them
Yeah, I mean,
when I'm trying to communicate with them. Yeah.
well, if the neuroscientists are right, and that
Yes.
your brain, the way your brain works reflects the brains that you're connected to. If you're connected to the AI of a game, that's what your brain is like. You're losing the breadth of human functioning if you're not interacting with human beings.
I was lucky enough that Sonic the Hedgehog wasn't technical enough to connect with when I was a kid, so video games weren't good enough to do that to me, really.
Yeah,
A bit
yeah.
harder now.
But it's such a lucrative business. It's very hard to find research that looks at any problems.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, I guess finance is behind it and corporations and stuff. So I have a theory. And I'd be quite interested if you could pull it apart, if you could try, which would be good. Is that it sort of ties to this? I don't know. It's just been something I've been thinking about lately, and I think it kind of ties into this somatic empathy. Is it kind of looking at compassion versus cruelty in people? And when I'm talking about compassion, I don't necessarily mean the sort of deep connection to divinity that people might talk about, sort of Christ-like compassion. I'm talking a more down-to-earth compassion that people have for each other. I think that my theory is that compassion on that level has to have a basis in empathy first, to be able to connect with, to express that compassion. And I think sometimes what happens with compassion is if you feel overwhelmed by the experience that you have from somebody, you kind of switch off. And often I think it turns into cruelty. So there's a kind of the flip side comes out. So my working theory, I guess, is that because we're now via the internet exposed to so much pain across the entire world rather than just our community, like I know about a lorry that flipped over and 2 people died in Egypt or something last week, things that I'm not really designed to know neurologically, that because we're constantly overwhelmed by so much of this stuff we're supposed to feel, that it kind of switches into the cruelty. So compassion gets switched off, if you get what I mean.
Yeah,
Does
I
that
mean,
make sense?
I feel a similar concern. There isn't an awful lot of research on it, but that's what I feel is that when we're overloaded with our own somatic empathy about the world, we have to shut it down, because otherwise we're not gonna function. And people in situations where they have to, I mean, the caring industry, I don't know why, but it's got a huge problem with cruelty. And
Sure.
the figures are appalling, and people are trying to find out, social scientists are trying to find out why. I mean, it's not that cruel people are attracted to these situations, or is it? Or your theory that they go in as normal, caring people, and they get overwhelmed, and that cruelty is some sort of weird shut down, go away mechanism. But no, it's a field of ongoing inquiry, and I think that there is that danger that we go past shutdown into. And I think cruelty and attack might be the fight and flight bit. If you get if you get triggered by strong emotional feelings of concern, then perhaps you can trigger that fight bit of the fight and flight, where you're hitting out at the thing that needs your sympathy rather than your violence.
I felt it in another way as well. I mean, I couldn't ever profess to have the same pressures under me as a sort of frontline care worker, for sure. They're having seen what their work life is like. It's pretty over the top stressful. But
Really
even
difficult.
as a situation where I'm teaching, sometimes I feel the pressure of a lot of people either wanting something or wanting help or something. Because no matter how much you present yourself as like, I'm here to teach mechanics, which, as you know, I've been trying to say for years, there's always an underlying feeling from a lot of people. They want help with something. I need help. I need to change. I'm in trouble. I'm in strife. And my heart, for want of a better word, tells me that I need to be there for these people and empathize with them and connect. And if I'm not tired or overwhelmed, I can do that. And actually, I feel a great kind of bliss, for want of a better word, that arises when I'm working with people, because I'm just there for them and trying to work with them. But then the opposite happens. Then I get overwhelmed. Maybe it's too long. I did my usual thing, made the course too big, too long. And then what kicks in is the empathy switches off, I think, as a self-defense mechanism. I can feel less. I feel less inside me too. Like I feel less in them. So therefore my inner awareness turns off too. It's like my lack of compassion or my lack of empathy switches off my ability to work with the insides of my body. So my cultivation suffers. And then I feel Jiminy Cricket, the conscience is there saying, you're doing a bad job for these people and you're not empathizing for these people. And then that's what reaction wise brings out my cruelty. It's like my guilt produces this kind of venom that I have to kind of know that's the time that I need to step away from everything.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the same. It's a personal thing, but and I've learned to manage it better as the years go on. But I wonder if that is mapped out on a larger scale to people that are constantly bombarded by all this pain, because guilt is a thing that really stings us, like, obviously.
Yeah, no, that sounds highly plausible because we are constantly bombarded. Yeah. And I know that, studies on doctors, GPs, when they see over 100 people a day, they start to just not give a toss for something. Just can't. There's a limit to how much you can care.
Yes.
Before it starts to be harmful. And I guess that's why people have you should have a little entourage of people that protect you.
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, I do. Things are getting better. Things are getting better. I'm also, not that I want to turn this into anything about me, but I'm better at managing it than I used to, because I can maybe even reading your book the last few days has been really helpful to put a framework on it. And whether it's an accurate framework or not for me, at the moment, it's a useful one. And I think it's something I felt for a while and I've had to learn how to manage better. And it's just distancing. You need to take yourself away. And when you take yourself away, you have to take yourself away from online as well, because otherwise you're just being bombarded with other people's pain. And the next thing you're looking at the massacre in Myanmar or whatever, and it's like Ukraine and Gaza, and then it's just overloaded again. And you need that break from it all, I think, sometimes.
Are you aware that how you're processing, when you're standing in front of a room full of students, do you feel when you look at someone, or is it, do you know how your somatic empathy works best? What kind of, do you need to be near people?
No, I need to have visual connection for me. I think I'm a visual person. Is this different for different people?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Oh, okay. For me, it's visual. I'll often, if I'm well, lots of energy, not taught lots, so I'm at my optimum. I think it's fair to say that if I'm stood in front of a class and I look at someone, if I don't know them, then there's an overwhelming feeling, something of whatever is going on for them underneath, and I will feel their sadness or their grief or sometimes their nervousness, quite often, because I seem to make people nervous for some reason when I first meet them. It's probably that. And I think oddly, my reaction is it makes me smile. I feel something opens up inside me and I feel a big grin, and then I see them react and then they relax and then they open up too. So I think it's the vision and the smile, I think, is the connection there between me and the person, I think. How about you? You teach.
You can feel somatic empathy just by thinking about someone, yeah?
If I like them.
Yeah, there's that thing.
Yeah. If I like them, yeah. How about you? What do you teach? What's your experience?
I think vision is really important, but I use a lot of visual cues, I think. But also listening and smelling, and I'm really close to my clients, so I'm touching them. And of course contact, this 3D kinesthetic contact, so I've got both hands on them and each hand is doing a different thing and I'm moving and my attention and intention is changing, so this sort of perceptual landscape's really complex and stuffed full of information. And so what will be happening simulation, my interoception will be flashing through all sorts of different changes, and it's like, which one am I interested in, which bits are meaningful and which aren't, and that's where practice and so on comes in.
Discernment.
Yeah.
I remember you're much more you're definitely much more visual than me as well. Like you used to, you would, I think it's fair to say your brain or something in you translates what you're feeling into imagery for you as well, right? Like
Right.
archetypal imagery and things.
It
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
So what do you think? Mine doesn't do that. Mine is more.
Really?
No, not at all. Mine is just, I just know. It's like someone's told me. It's like I'm recalling something somebody has told me about someone. So maybe you could explain to us the nature, or explain to me the nature of that kind of visual archetype. Because I know you see things like skull and crossbones and stuff like this, right? Those kind of symbols, even.
That's not good, by the way.
No, I know. No, I was quite glad you've never said that. Never said you've said that around me. So flamingos.
So
That's what you see around me.
think is going on is that I get, my body simulates my perception of this other person, and that process is ongoing. So it trawls through lots of different simulations until there's something recognizable.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like turning a radio dial until you find a channel. And sometimes I don't find a channel at all, and it's just a load of nonsense, just a load of yuck, But sometimes there's a really clear interpretation that my unconscious makes. So, for example, I could be working on someone, and I'm thinking, oh, I haven't got a clue what's going on here, and then I'll see in my mind's eye this word come right across in front of me, in big letters with an exclamation mark, and it's almost like my unconscious treats me like I'm an idiot. It's like I'm still going, I don't know what's going on, and it goes, duh.
Sure.
So there's some sort of, my unconscious really struggles to communicate with the little conscious part of my mind, and the visual stuff is a way of trying to communicate with the conscious part. Famous neuroscientist David Chalmers says that our conscious mind is like a broom cupboard in the mansion of the mind. So most of the mind is like out of your awareness, and mine tries really hard to communicate with the broom cupboard, and it will come up with imagery that it knows. I'll go, oh yeah, right, I get that, or a word, or I'll hear a word, and it's not that these things are being sent to me from anywhere else. My unconscious is creating them just to try and communicate with my tiny little broom cupboard.
It would be like the Hun-based language in sort of Taoist terminology, right, or something like that, right. I guess.
Yeah.
So it must after a while create a shared language, a language for you. So, for example, like skull and crossbones or something, which even I can understand that's not great with my dim brain. If you see a skull and crossbones, I'm presuming if that comes up multiple times, you must start to develop almost a conscious language as well as what you're picking up somatically.
Well, what's interesting is that some of the imagery didn't mean anything to me until I kind of, I don't know, like I was working on a woman, and a really strong image of a bird's nest.
Yeah.
With no birds in it, and all these birds flying about above it. Now, to me, that instantly meant crazy. Crazy.
Sure.
I want the birds to settle in the nest. I don't want them flapping about.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really kind of personal, individual interpretation, birds flapping about and whatever. But apparently it's quite archetypal, that image of, being unsettled and so on. So I think that, there's that tapping into imagery that is quite shared between us as a species.
It's almost like taking dream analysis and bringing it through to the conscious touch in a way, right?
Totally. I think it's very likely the same thing.
Yeah. It's an interesting phenomenon, understanding how different people translate it, and having no visual feedback in that way. That's just not my nature. I can connect with someone visually, but my brain doesn't interpret it in that way for me. I'm
Well, you've
I'm
got
jealous
that out,
actually.
haven't you? You've gone straight to the knowing, which is where you want to be. Whereas I'm faffing about going, well, what does that mean?
I quite like to see the skull and crossbones actually, though. Sounds quite fun.
Yeah. And as you say, there can be really sophisticated and detailed information that you know. We're not just picking up anxiety or, anything broad. We can, you can infer really sophisticated information about other people using this really ancient form of intelligence. And I just love the fact that, the evidence is coming in now that other, our companion animals do this with us. And yeah.
Sure. It reminds me of when I speak to my teacher and I ask him very much about how to progress in a general way, like as a practitioner, as a developer, what do I need? And his answer consistently for the last couple of years has been to feel other people's things more and to learn to like people more, essentially has been the instruction. So I'm working on it. But that it strikes me as those are the two things that are needed for somatic empathy, right? Or two of them, I would say.
I mean, I'm a loner. I live alone. I think being sensitive, somatic empath goes with the need to live alone.
Sure.
Yeah. Do you need to like? I do like people. I just don't like to feel their stuff all the time.
I think the view of my teacher is not that I don't like people, but that I think he wants a higher degree of connection for me. So therefore, I think his desire is that I have to break down the barriers that create contention between me and others so that there's a greater degree of connection and feeling. I think is the instruction. Almost the same as many religions or spiritual traditions have said, essentially, isn't it? That sort of loving or compassion for all beings is ultimately the way to move through to connection with spirit, right?
Yeah, and I think, as you've been saying all along, the really important thing is is that we are connected and that our bodies do respond to each other. And that isn't anything fluffy. It's quite powerful. It's quite, it's quite primal. And to learn how to turn that up and down so that we stay healthy.
Okay. Yes.
Not
Well,
saying.
maybe that's a good thing to be quite nice if we could sort of encapsulate that. Maybe you could kind of bring this all together by giving us an explanation, because obviously I think a lot of people hearing this are going to be very interested in this concept, but maybe they've had flashes of it and maybe they've shut it off, or maybe someone is struggling with it. I'm sure you've had people contact you struggling with this concept. Do you have any, I know it's very on the spot, and I always hate it when I do interviews and people ask me these kind of questions, but on the spot, would you have any guidance for anybody how to work with this or integrate it into what they're doing, if they're, say, a therapist or a practitioner or a cultivator or something?
Yeah, I think the first thing to do is to just notice when it happens and not try and overinterpret it. So one of the ways people get bogged down is that they're amazed at how sensitive they are, and they're really impressed with themselves at how sensitive they are. They want to keep telling everybody how amazingly sensitive they are, and overinterpreting, I could feel that person's loss, and I could feel that, and it's like, yeah, but that's getting in the way now. So once you know that that's happening, you can just be more kind of casually observant of it. So if you're feeling uncomfortable, just glancing round as to who in your life could be contributing to that, because it could be your own discomfort, might be nothing to do with anybody else in the room, and just starting to learn. And it has to be trial and error. There isn't a kind of short way. I can't teach people how to do it. It's the trial and error of yours and somebody else's. So as I said, what I did for years was to notice during shiatsu, if I had a strong feeling, I would just check with the person, and that gave me the confidence to know, okay, so when that happens, that's somatic empathy. And then I would notice it in a social situation, and I would realize that I'm shifting my attention. I'm not looking at them, you know, and I'm kind of closing down. I don't want to feel any more of that. But I don't avoid people that make me uncomfortable anymore, you know, like you were saying,
Sure.
because I've got slightly more confidence that I can cope with it afterwards. So
Okay.
I don't mind sharing a really unpleasant, you know, even really unpleasant mental state with someone, because I'm more confident that I can shift that after we've separated or whatever. So I think being scared of someone because you might catch something from them is not good, because it emphasizes amplifies your neuroception, which is looking for danger. So your whole system will be geared up to look for danger. So if you're scared of someone, if you're scared of catching bad stuff from someone, it will make things worse for you. So I think you have to develop a kind of confidence that, you know, nothing terrible is going to happen. You might feel bad for a while, but you'll get over
I think
it.
that's really, really good advice. That's because the amount of people who have that mindset, whereas I've like yourself experienced things that linger afterwards, you know, and it's like and then my attitude if I wake up in the morning is still there, as I just think, oh, you muppet, why did you let it stick? And that's always been my mindset, and then it just goes, rather than concerning myself with, oh, it's going to turn into whatever, you
I
know.
think it's really important to shift yourself from being a victim to being you know, a simulator. You're just a 3D simulator.
Yeah, I like that. No, that's great. That's really good. Well, is there anything you want to tell anybody? Obviously, can you hold your book up? Hold your book up again, because I have a copy
Won't
of
it come
the
round
book, but
back to
only
front?
online. No, it's the right way round. It's got
Oh,
a
that's
blue
good.
stripe across it. Oh, I see. That's saying
It's
it's
the
for.
proof copy. Yeah.
So Cindy Engel, PhD. She is a lady of great education, sophistication, and intelligence compared to myself. Called Another Self: How Your Body Helps You Understand Others. Like I say, I read it the last few days. I don't read, actually. I can't stand reading because every time I pick up a book, it's crap. But I actually really enjoyed this one. I thought this was highly beneficial, and I could highly recommend people reading it, because I think, especially in the field we're in, I think it's great. So I can highly recommend it for sure. Is there
Thank
anything else
you.
you want to advertise to people that you're doing?
No. We've spoken for ages now.
Oh, come on. You have a class in
Go
where?
now.
Come on. And you do an online course. I know you do.
Yes, I've got because the book is quite sort of dense and there's a lot of information in there, and not everyone likes reading. And so I've got an online course which is video, so you can just watch and listen, get the same sort of information. And there'll be a little ebook which is sort of a sort of simpler version, a simplified version of all this stuff. So there should be 3 different formats coming out. There's two at the moment.
Okay, great. That's really good.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's been great to see you.
No, it's been nice chatting. It's been great.
Every 20 years we should get together.
When did I last see you? Like
It was
2, 3
only
years
4
ago,
years
yeah?
ago, actually. It was just before COVID.
Or was it? Back
Yeah.
when everybody was frightened of catching things off of each other. Yeah,
In
sure.
Portugal. Yeah.
Yes, and before that, probably like China or Thailand or something. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I will put links to all of your stuff under this. So anybody watching this who's interested in what Cindy does, then you can find it underneath this video. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Great speaking to
Bye.
you, and thanks for sharing all of this.